London and Johannesburg-listed Gemfields specialises in the mining and marketing of emeralds and rubies. It's one of the largest companies of its kind which focus itself on this area of the market. It's just had what it says was an excellent year with record emerald and ruby auction results, and also it was its maiden dividend year as well. Gilbertson is the chief executive. He joins us now. Sean, welcome. Congratulations. You've been at the company now, a number of years. You've been CEO for, 5 or 6 of those. It was a good year last year. What's going on?
Well, the coloured gemstone business has grown significantly since I first joined the business in 2007. We always thought that increasing and delivering consistent, reliable supply would help the downstream business grow as more and more downstream people got involved in the industry. And in fact, that's precisely what has happened. And we've seen both demand and also surprisingly pricing increase over that period of time. It's been an amazing journey, and anybody with a calculator in 5 minutes will be able to see from information that's already in the public domain that our revenues year on year have increased approximately 30%, which is quite remarkable, and also that about 1/2 of our market cap sits in net cash. The ruby mine increased its revenues by about 13% to 166 million US, and the emerald mine increased its revenues by about 60% to 149 million US dollars, which is an all-time record. So it's a real go-go sector.
Which, when you consider what happened last year in terms of geopolitics and general sort of consumer pressures and so forth, whereabouts your biggest markets? Who is buying the emeralds and rubies?
So we're an unusual business in that the production that comes from our emerald mine, which is the world's largest, and our ruby mine, which is also the world's largest, we don't actually cut and polish those gemstones. A little bit like the De Beers model, we do sell those gems in the uncut form, and the emeralds go primarily to India, and the rubies go primarily to Bangkok in Thailand. So they're quite differentiated markets, which gives us a little bit of risk diversification. Those customers of ours will then do the cutting and polishing and on-sell to the brands that we all know.
Talk to me a little bit more about the market. As I said at the top, and you've alluded to really good results from the auctions last year. What's driving that? What is it that's happened that's given us these results of these auctions?
I'd say perhaps the single biggest factor, Jeremy, has been pent-up demand that accrued during the course of the pandemic. And so obviously there were severe restrictions on our ability to sell emeralds and rubies during the pandemic. As you can imagine, we sell thousands of gemstones at an auction. We have hundreds of people in a room at the same time, and people touching the gemstones, passing them to others. We were effectively cut off from our revenue. And so to protect the business and conserve cash, we actually stopped both the world's largest emerald mine and the world's largest ruby mine for 1 year. We didn't make anybody redundant.
So you closed them
we
down?
Shut both mines in 2020, made nobody redundant across 2,800 jobs in the Gemfields group. Everybody sat at home for a year, earning 80% of their pay. And as the market started opening up again and things became logistically possible, we went back to market with auction. And I think what that helped to do was create a lot of pent-up demand, not only amongst end consumers who'd been stuck at home, hadn't been spending, and had additional money to spend, but obviously also a lot of the midstream pipeline had been cleared out and had to top up with inventory. And so 21 was super, and quite frankly, 2022 surprised even us with some of the prices that we saw.
There were a lot of surprises that came out of 2022. I can tell you, having spoken to a lot of chief executives about company operations last year. 2023, how are things set up now for this year? Are you expecting the same sort of performance, or do you think last year was a bit of a flash in the pan?
Well, if I just get my crystal ball out of my pocket, it's obviously the teams are working extremely hard to control the things that we have reasonable control over. So, for example, the amount of mining that we do, trying to control our costs in a pretty inflationary environment. But in reality, we're obviously also at the throes and ebbs of the economic situation, and there are many observers who are a bit concerned about what 2023 holds. Fortunately for us, emeralds and rubies over centuries have been regarded as something of a store of value. And there is a degree of counter-cyclicality that we have observed in the 16 or 17 years that we've been doing this. And so let's keep them crossed.
How's the market for these stones in this category compared to diamonds, which one might regard possibly as the king of all precious stones? Correct me if I'm wrong.
That's an excellent question, and I will correct you just very briefly, because the thing that most people don't realize is that at world record prices, so I'm talking Sotheby's, Christie's, Bonhams,
right,
the most expensive gemstone per carat is actually a ruby. It's not a colorless diamond.
Right.
And the second most expensive is an emerald. It's not a colorless diamond. Then come the colorless or white diamonds, and then come sapphires. And we think it probably won't be long before the sapphires are also on the other side of that chart. I'm excluding from that, just for full transparency, colored diamonds, so the pinks, the reds, which have absolutely astronomical prices. But the world record price for a ruby is $1.2 million per carat, which is $6 million per gram. So really quite remarkable numbers.
Did either of those two gemstones you're talking about come from the mines that you operate, or was it somewhere?
As it happens, they did not. Those are what are categorized as old mine stones. So the ruby happened to be Burmese, and the emerald happened to be a Colombian.
Just looking through some of the anecdotal notes that are in the market about your business, about the business of Gemfields, Librum's got a note out saying 34 pence price target. Let's bring up a share price chart just to show you. And in fact, in the context of what you're talking about, the amount of cash you've got, net cash you've got, and you're looking at 17.12 pence. This is the London-listed share price chart. 34 pence, getting your calculator out, is double where we are. How are you going to get there? Is that more of a realistic valuation? What's been priced in at 17 pence? I should say as well, you're in a closed period as well, aren't you? So you can't talk about any sort of major underlying dynamics of balance sheet or profit and loss. But just give us an overview about what this share price is telling us.
Perfect. Very, very happy to do that. And as you say, I'm not going to give you any information I'm not allowed to give you.
Sure.
However, we're a very transparent business, and so we actually publish all of our revenues as the year progresses. As soon as we do an auction, those figures hit the public domain. And anybody with 5 minutes in a calculator will be able to work out very quickly that about 1/2 of our market cap of 250 million US is held in net cash, which means that for about 125 million US, one's getting 75% of the world's biggest ruby mine, 75% of the world's biggest emerald mine, and 100% of the worldwide Fabergé brand. So the value proposition, I think, is pretty remarkable. And having worked for Gemfields since 2007, our focus is very much on getting the operations going and cranking out the cash and trying to return cash to shareholders, which has been a long time coming.
I want to talk a little bit more about the cash in just a minute. You mentioned Fabergé. I'm going to talk about that anyway, but let's talk about that more now, because that is a very high profile retail side of the business, isn't it? What are you doing with it now? Because you've had it 10 years or so?
Yes, so literally 2013 was Gemfields' acquisition of Fabergé, excellent memory. And really Fabergé is a great marketing piece for us for emeralds, rubies and sapphires. Particularly, of course, Fabergé uses quite a lot of Zambian emeralds and Mozambique rubies. We're not a vertically integrated business, that's very important. Remember, we don't do any cutting and polishing. So everything that comes out the ground goes to our customers in the rough form, and Fabergé stands on its own 2 feet, purchasing in the market as and when it sees fit. But it's been able to engage in some really amazing collaborations. So it makes what I regard to be the world's finest cufflinks. It's made 2 watches that have won the Geneva Watch Grand Prix. They're simply superb. And it's been extremely proud to have created some amazing multi-million-dollar Fabergé eggs, including the Spirit of Ecstasy egg with Rolls-Royce motor cars, the official Game of Thrones egg with HBO, and most recently we've just announced the first ever official Fabergé 007 egg in conjunction with Eon Productions, which will feature, I'm not allowed to tell you.
Just out of interest, does Fabergé actually, is it a profitable part of the business, or is it just one of these sort of marketing things? Look, don't get me wrong, it's got a massive brand value, I understand that. Do you actually make any profit out of it?
That's an excellent question, and it has certainly been a long journey. And 2022, again, based on the publicly available information, people will be able to see was a very strong year for Fabergé, best to date. And we have been out and about previously saying that we hope that 2023, subject to the market conditions, of course, will be the first year in which it attains a profit. So it's been a long journey, but it continues to make solid progress.
Just want to pick up on that point about cash as well. I want to end on this sort of area of the market because I think it's something worth interesting. Anybody sort of dancing around the idea about looking at this as an opportunity to invest in. And you're talking here to IG investors who like the idea of looking at something that's going to give them a return over a period of time. You've got this cash on the balance sheet. Again, you're in the closed period. You can't talk too much about how it's going to develop and so forth. But just tell me a little bit more about the dividend. You paid a dividend last year for the first time. What's your dividend strategy? Is that going to soak up some of this cash that's washing around, or are you going to be using the cash for something else?
So Gemfields shareholders have waited a long time for their maiden dividend. It was actually queued up for March 2020, but of course then we walked straight into our friendly neighborhood virus and we sat on the cash instead. And after 2 years of basically recovery and balance sheet restoration, we not only paid out a full year dividend, which was paid in about May of 22, but the year was so strong that we actually followed that up with an interim dividend. So if you look at the trailing 12-month dividend yield for Gemfields, it's a pretty whopping 14%, which is quite remarkable. And of course, yes, we have quite a lot of cash on our balance sheet. All of that will be discussed at our board meeting at the end of the first quarter, but it has certainly been this management's ambition to return cash to shareholders.
Do you like the idea of mergers and acquisitions, or do you think you're at your sort of peak operational size, shape and dynamic?
So we're obviously very keen on emeralds, rubies and sapphires. We're very Africa focused. We like world-class assets, as I think can be seen from the three items that make up the prime of our portfolio. We are not aware of any other world-class assets that fit our current strategy, so I certainly wouldn't be anticipating any major M&A activity. We would very much like to add a proper sapphire deposit, but those don't crop up every day. At some point one will be found, and we certainly hope to be there, but we certainly don't expect to spend a lot of money on M&A at all. We do have a need and a desire to expand our processing plant, which washes the ruby-bearing gravels in the north of Mozambique. That's a fairly capital-intensive exercise, but in reality at the moment we have to balance that with what has been a 5-year running insurgency in the north of Mozambique in Cabo Delgado province.
We've got to leave it there, but thanks for joining us. It's been a pleasure talking to you about the trip you've been on last year and looking at 2023. But Sean, in the meantime, thanks for joining us.
An honour indeed. Thank you very much, Jerry.
Sean Gilbertson, he's the Chief Executive of London and Johannesburg-listed Gemfields.